Good afternoon. My name is Henriette Stöver, and I'm a policy analyst at the European University Association. I'm immensely pleased and honored to be welcoming you today to the reopening of the MSCA4Ukraine scheme and the dedicated information session that we're having thanks to a recent €10 million top-up by the European Commission under the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. If I could have my slides, please. Thank you very much. I'm joined today by a very distinguished set of speakers, but before handing the floor to them, I would just like to go through a couple of housekeeping rules. First of all, I need to let you know that this webinar is, of course, being recorded. We will offer the recording on the MSCA4Ukraine website as well as EUA's YouTube channel pretty much right after the event. You will also be receiving an email with the recording, the slides of all speakers, and follow-up materials as well after the event. In addition, we will do our best to issue the webinar or highlights of the webinar as quickly as possible, also with English language and Ukrainian language subtitles, and you will hear from us again when this has happened. As you can see here on the screen, we very warmly encourage you to participate in this event and ask many questions to the speakers. You can join our conversation in various ways. On the right-hand side of your screen, you see different functions. First of all, you have this chat function. In this function, we would like you to say hello, where you're from, where you're located. You can also report technical issues to us that you might experience, so our team in the background can address them. And you can comment on the conversation overall. Perhaps most importantly today, though, is the Q&A part of the webinar, also located on the right-hand side of your screen. Here you can ask questions to all of our speakers, you might wonder that when you type a question and hit send, it might not right away appear on the screen for all other participants. This is because we are having people in the background moderating the Q&A to ensure that questions are only coming up once a speaker has finished speaking about a particular topic. So we might, for instance, ask a question about how to apply right at the beginning, but this will only pop up to everyone else once we are actually at that part of the webinar. So please be patient, and we will, of course, try to answer all of your questions, or as many as we can today. Last but not least, during our conversation, you can also let us know how you found this webinar, what we could do better next time, and there will be a survey that will be sent to you alongside the recording and the slides after the webinar. As mentioned, I'm very honored to be joined today by quite a list of distinguished speakers. I won't go through all of them right now, but I just wanted to let you know something about the structure of today's program. We will have a couple of welcoming words from the leadership of the Consortium Partners organization, namely that would be Scholars at Risk Europe, Maynooth University, the European University Association, and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. This will be then followed by the formal reopening of the MSCA4Ukraine program, and this will be done by the European Commission, and we are also joined by the Horizon Europe office in Ukraine. And last but not least, and pretty much the largest part of today's webinar, will be dedicated to the info session part, MSCA4Ukraine in practice. Here I will be joined by speakers from the Commission, the executive agencies, and by colleagues from our consortium partners to explain you all the details about how to apply to MSCA4Ukraine, what it is about, and so on. As you would have seen on the program, we have also allocated a very large amount of time for questions and answers that might come in. So we are looking forward to receiving your questions, particularly for the last part, but do feel free to address questions to all of our speakers, and I will try to pick them up in between each of these webinar sections. Without further ado then, I would like to open the webinar and start with the welcoming round. And I will be joined now by Frank Geary, the Director of Scholars at Risk Europe, located in Ireland, actually at Maynooth University. And therefore, I'm also joined by Gemma Irvine, the Vice President for Equality and Diversity of Maynooth University. I'm also joined by Amanda Crawford, Secretary General of the European University Association, and by Thomas Hesse, Secretary General ad interim of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. I would like to first give the floor to Frank for some brief welcome words from Scholars at Risk Europe. Frank, the floor is yours.
Joining us today. Especially, I want to thank the MSCA4Ukraine Fellows and Ukrainian researchers. You are the heart of this program. We know that you are working hard to continue your careers and to continue to contribute to your home academic institutions, even while facing uncertainty. So you are the reason that we are here today, and you are the reason that this program has been created. Scholars at Risk Europe is the European office of the Global Scholars at Risk Network, and we're hosted by Maynooth University in Ireland. We focus on protecting scholars and promoting academic freedom. Our main activities are coordination of actors in Europe working with researchers at risk through the Inspire Europe Plus project and the Scholars at Risk Network in Europe. Policy work and advocacy for academic freedom, and support for scholars at risk through programs such as MSCA4Ukraine. And later this month, Scholars at Risk will present the 2024 Courage to Think Award collectively to the scholars of Ukraine, recognizing their courage, resilience, and unwavering commitment to research and education. MSCA4Ukraine is currently providing fellowships of up to 2 years for over 125 researchers from Ukraine in 21 host countries, with an original budget of €25 million, thanks to the vision of the European Commission. MSCA4Ukraine strongly encourages continued connection for fellows with institutions in Ukraine. And together with our partners from the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation and the European Universities Association, we provide networking and training opportunities. And we complement efforts across Europe to support higher education and research in Ukraine. So thank you all for being here today, and thank you all for being part of the MSCA4Ukraine initiative. Thank you.
Thanks so much for setting the scene, Frank. I would like to hand over right to Gemma from Maynooth University.
Hello, everybody, and thank you. My name is Gemma Irvine. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Vice President for Equality and Diversity in Maynooth University in Ireland. We have a strong focus on social justice and human rights, and we're a designated University of Sanctuary with scholarships for students who are asylum seekers and refugees, and a Scholars at Risk Fellowship program for staff who have had to flee their home countries. And this forms the Excellence in Exile pillar of our work. We're very proud to host the European Office for the Global Scholars at Risk Network, and we support the SAR Europe Office in all of their excellent work. And the MSCA4Ukraine program is a fantastic example of this. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the European Commission's vision in establishing the MSCA4Ukraine actions, and for recognizing the need to support Ukrainian researchers who are displaced and supporting Ukrainian higher education and research. The extension of the MSCA4Ukraine program, which is being launched today, is thanks to the European Commission's additional €10 million funding. This additional funding is not only welcome, but needed, and in view of the ongoing, and in some parts of the country, intensifying aggressions of the Russian Federation against Ukraine and its impact on the research community. There are many stakeholders involved in making this program a success, and I'd like to thank, in particular, the European Commission, and in particular, Claire Morrell, who spearheads the MSCA unit at DG EAC, and her colleague, Maria and the European Research Executive Agency, Dr. Graham Wilkie, Alexandra Goncalves-Pedersen, and colleagues. We've also got project partners and associate partners with Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, the European Universities Association, and associate partners in PAUSE and Scholars at Risk. And we have an advisory board that I'd like to thank the members for their strategic guidance. Professor Olga Garashuk, Dr. Olga Polinska, Professor Luke Jury, Professor Yuri Kleber, Professor Jerry Danskansky, and Dr. Svetlana Shokova, Professor Juliana Gabria, and Amanda Crowfoot, who is the Secretary General of our partner, European Universities Association. And I'd also like to thank the program staff who worked so hard to deliver these actions, and to thank the researchers, the fellows, and host institutions who've engaged actively with these actions and supported the open exchange of knowledge and research. They've supported at-risk scholars, and they've strengthened academic freedom.
Thank you so much, Gemma, also for underlining the hard work that has been going into this program from many people, and we're glad that so far it has been a success. I would like to now hand over to our very own Amanda.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure to be here today to say a few words of welcome on behalf of the European University Association. For those who may not know us, EUA is the largest European university association. We represent approximately 900 members across all countries of the European higher education area. And we're really pleased that amongst our membership, we have 45 Ukrainian universities and also the National Rectors Conference, the National University Association of Ukraine. We are extremely proud and pleased to be part of this partnership and this really important scheme for Ukrainian researchers. And I'd just like to highlight that the higher education sector across Europe really remains committed to solidarity with and support for Ukrainian colleagues. And I'd just like to give you a few examples of what that means in practice. So at EUA, we recently conducted a survey as part of our Trends 2024 report, where we had responses from almost 500 European higher education institutions in 47 different countries. And those responses showed that 80% of the institutions have solidarity measures in place for supporting Ukrainian students or staff or institutions, which I think is a really positive, number. We found that 2/3 of the respondents actually host Ukrainian students, and in approximately half of those cases, they have special conditions such as reduced fees or support grants of some sort. And over 40% of the institutions host academic staff from Ukraine. We also found that 1/3 of institutions have enhanced their existing partnerships with Ukrainian institutions, and another 1/3 have established new partnerships and relationships. And this, I think, is an extremely encouraging development. EUA produced some recommendations last year on how the European higher education sector can support Ukraine. And one thing we identified was the importance of interinstitutional collaboration as a key success factor for supporting Ukrainian higher education. So related to that, we're extremely glad that the MSCA4Ukraine programme offers these much needed fellowships to researchers, but also that it aims to foster links with Ukrainian home institutions, for example, through enabling secondments. So our goal at EUA, just to finish, is to ensure that despite the current situation, the Ukrainian higher education sector can continue to develop, it can continue to participate actively in international higher education and research, and that it can be a key partner in European policy processes. This is why EUA and its members engages both through the MSC4Ukraine programme and also other activities to support Ukraine. So thank you for joining us today. I hope you find the webinar very useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda, also for highlighting the continued support of the European higher education sector and enhanced collaboration with colleagues in Ukraine. Last but not least, in this round, I would now like to hand over to Thomas Hesse.
Thank you so much. Dear Deputy Director General Nornuts Popens, dear Head of Department Igor Taranov, dear Amanda, Gemma and Frank, dear representatives of the Directorate General for the Education, Youth, Sport and Culture and of the European Research Executive Agency, esteemed scholars and representatives of the Ukrainian and European research communities. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you to this launch of the second MSCA4Ukraine call on behalf of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. Let me begin by paying my respect to the Ukrainian people who have bravely resisted the full-scale aggression of the Russian Federation for almost 2.5 years by now, and particularly to those who have suffered injuries or even lost their lives in Ukraine's fight for its existence. I join our consortium partners in expressing our admiration for the Ukrainian researchers, both in exile as well as in the Ukraine, who continued their pursuit of knowledge against all odds and will play an important role in ensuring Ukraine's future. The mandate of the Humboldt Foundation is to support excellent academics and their international collaborations independent of the fields of research or nationality. Over the past about 70 years, we have supported more than 200 top-level scholars from the Ukraine to fellowships and research awards, and the network of these Ukrainian alumni is particularly active to this day. As early as 2017, we also started supporting the first Ukrainian scholars through our Scholars Protection Program, the Philip Schwarz Initiative. Since February 2022, the number of exiled Ukrainian scholars supported through the PSI and its Ukraine emergency funds has surged to more than 150, and they have found safe havens at universities and higher education institutions all over Germany. And we also bring Ukrainian fellows together, both from our own programs and those of other funders. We work to foster new connections and invite fellows to discuss what is needed now to help rebuild Ukraine's science, research, and innovation system. Input that we then bring to the attention of political stakeholders. Just as an example, this week, the president of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, Professor Robert Schlögl, highlighted the importance of science and international academic collaboration at the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Berlin. And thus, it is this launch of the second call of the MSC for Ukraine. My hopefulness originates from the fact that we will be able to support another 50 excellent researchers through MSCA4Ukraine. That the European Union does recognize the immense importance of research to build a brighter future for the Ukraine. That we can count yet again on the solidarity of hosts, reviewers, administrators across Europe to join this effort. The Humboldt Foundation is proud to be part of this unified European response, together with Scholars at Risk Europe at Maynooth University and the European University Association. And I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the European Parliament and Commission for further strengthening MSCA4Ukraine and for entrusting us to implement this ambitious program. And I'm also grateful to the Research Executive Agency and the Commission's DG EAC for their immense support and advice. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our partners, the MSCA4Ukraine Advisory Board, and the very dedicated staffs at our foundation and our partner institutions. But my deepest thanks and admiration go to our MSCA4Ukraine fellows, as well as their mentors and host institutions in 21 countries, and to our expert reviewers and the international academic community at large, who continue to show unprecedented solidarity and stand with Ukraine as a member of the European family of nations. And so we look forward to helping pave the way for another 50 researchers to continue their research in safety and prepare to contribute to re-emergence of a more resilient and more powerful Ukrainian academic community as our partner in Europe. So thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much to all of the speakers. If I could summarize and reiterate the words of the leaders of this consortium, we are indeed very proud and very pleased to be able to continue to support researchers from Ukraine through this scheme. I see that there are no questions directed at the speakers of this part of the webinar, and so we can move on to the next section. I would just like to remind participants not to worry. Your questions that have been posted are basically collected in the background, and they will be opened and visible to all of our participants when the relevant part of the webinar comes up. So far, we do have already a lot of questions on eligibility and so on, but this will be addressed in the info session part of this webinar. Again, a big thank you to the leaders of the consortium partner organizations, and I would like to now move on to the next part of the webinar, the official reopening of the second wave of MSCA4Ukraine. And for this part, I am joined by Norman Poppins from the European Commission, where he is the Deputy Director General at DG EAC, the Directorate for Education, Youth, Sports and Culture. And I'm also joined by Igor Taranov. Igor is the head of the Horizon Europe office in Ukraine, very recently established in Ukraine, actually. And I'm particularly pleased that Igor is actually joining us for the second time, because he was part of the initial launch of MSCA4Ukraine, then at a ministry in Ukraine. But first, we would like to give the floor to Norman Poppins for the official relaunching of the program.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me a floor. It's really a privilege and happiness for me to reopen the second call of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions for Ukraine. And I just wanted to say that I wasn't here for the first call, but as working for European Commission, I can tell you that, of course, the European Union has been supporting Ukraine in all possible ways since Russia started war, and we have been supporting Ukraine military, financially, economically, and of course supporting also the refugees coming from Ukraine to European Union. And in this DG, in DG EAC particularly, of course, we are trying to see how we can support this ecosystem of education, research and innovation in Ukraine, but also, of course, helping Ukrainian children to be part of European educational systems, still keeping ties with Ukraine. And of course, there's no doubt that progressively we are opening and we are providing all our programs also to our Ukrainian friends and partners to make sure that you can participate. In this context, this second call under Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions will allow us, as somebody said already, to train to allow additional 50 Ukrainian researchers who are doing doctoral and postdoctoral research, again, to continue their work, to do it in the European Union while still keeping ties with Ukraine, on top of 125 researchers which we have already supported. And I think we have to remember that even in times of war, we have to think about future. We have to think about our economies, societies, about challenges that are ahead of us. And research and innovation provides solutions and answers, forward-looking solutions and answers to our problems. And as such, we do believe, and everybody, I think, has read also the latest Letta report, which actually suggests that education and research should become the fifth freedom in the European Union, recognizing the role that education and research and innovation plays in all possible fields to respond to our societal, economical, and also military challenges. And in this context, keeping the Ukrainian researchers working and doing their job is very, very important. And here I know what I'm talking about, because in my young days, I was a young researcher in the Institute of Microbiology in Latvia. And when we announced our independence, Russia cut us off all possible resources, all supplies, including energy. And I still remember me working in a laboratory with the freezing -10 degrees temperature. We never gave up. And I think Ukrainians will never give up. And this is why, of course, this support we are providing through Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, I hope will also make a difference and will simply help all of us to, of course, maintain the Ukrainian research and innovation sector, which has suffered a lot of damages. But in a view of Ukraine being a candidate country, this will allow also Ukraine, but progressively, to become part of this wider EU education and research ecosystem. This is why I thank all our partners for working with us, the consortium and everyone, to make sure that this call and this project actually has become a success story. And I hope that today's seminar will also give you answers to your questions. And I am convinced that the second call will be as successful as the first one. So thank you all for listening to me and enjoy the further speakers.
Thank you so much, Norman, for your inspiring words. And let me just again express our gratitude to the European Commission for supporting the scheme and supporting European researchers, and indeed for paving the way to have Ukrainian higher education become part of our European research and education sector family. I think now I would like to hand over to Igor, and he should already be on screen. I hope there was no technical issue in the background, and I will wait for my communications team in the back.
I'm afraid his connection is lost, so he might come back, hopefully. Oh, he's back. 1 second.
Hello, Igor. No. Unfortunately, there are some connection issues. Okay, it seems to be fine for now. So I will try to be very quick by giving the floor to Igor, the head.
Igor, you can speak, you're live.
Yes, everything is right. I'm so sorry about my video because we right now under the attack from Russian Federation. I'm so sorry about it, and we follow our safety requirements. Unfortunately, we have to do it. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
May I go on?
Go ahead, yes.
Wait?
Please go.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It is with profound honor that I address today you from Kyiv, marking the revival of the unique MSCA4Ukraine initiative. This project is vital for Ukrainian researchers, offering crucial support at a time when their safety and lives are increasingly in risk. And in the face of mounting challenges, MSCA4Ukraine emerges as a guiding light, providing a sanctuary for those dedicated and advancing knowledge and driving innovation, even during times of hardship. As the custodians of scientific progress, we are duty-bound to extend our solidarity and support to those on the front lines of discovery. Their efforts are vital not only for the particular national scientific infrastructure progress, but also for the collective enrichment of European society. MSCA4Ukraine exemplifies our shared values of academic freedom and human dignity, acting as a stronghold against the forces of oppression. Confronted with challenges, it is crucial that we remain united, drawing strength from our shared determination to uphold the principle of knowledge sharing and academic research. The National Research Foundation of Ukraine, along with the structural unit as Horizon Europe office in Ukraine, established through a grant from the European Commission, recognizes the profound importance of the MSCA4Ukraine, relaunching it seeks to create a secure environment for Ukrainian researchers, ensuring they can maintain continuity with their academic institutions. This is term that addresses one of the most pressing issues facing the scientific community in Ukraine due to the ongoing war, the challenge of brain drain, but providing a secure environment and opportunities for researchers to continue their work. Initiatives like MSCA4Ukraine aim to stem the flow of talent leaving the country. Retaining skilled scientists within Ukraine not only ensures the continuity of vital research projects, but also contributes to the nation's long-term scientific development and innovation. Moreover, reducing brain drain helps to safeguard Ukraine's intellectual capital and maintain its competitiveness in the global scientific arena. Ultimately, these efforts are essential for rebuilding and strengthening Ukraine's scientific infrastructure in the aftermath of war. Apart from that, the uniqueness of the MSCA4Ukraine lies not only in its mission, but also in the synergies present from the ideological design to the parties involved in its implementation. The collaborative efforts among the various stakeholders, including the European Commission, human rights organizations, research institutions, associations, and foundations, embodies with the core values of unity and partnership inherent in the Horizon Europe Framework Program for Research and Innovation. Such collective engagement underscore European society's steadfast dedication to promoting democratic values and advancing scientific inquiry across borders. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I'd like to extend heartfelt gratitude representing both the entire office team and myself to all those who have contributed to the revitalization of MSCA4Ukraine. The office wholeheartedly reaffirms its support for the brave researchers who persevere in their quest for knowledge. Let us unite with determination and resilience, confident and that our combined efforts will lead to a brighter and more enlightened future.
Thank you so much, Igor, and thank you to both for your very important words, underlining both the need, but also especially the opportunities for further collaboration with the Ukrainian higher education sector, be it through MSCA4Ukraine or the other measures that Igor just mentioned and that his office newly established in Ukraine will support. There are no questions, as far as you can see at least, directed at you. We still have a lot of questions coming in on eligibility and details. So I think I would also now close this part of this webinar and go over to the details, nitty-gritty details of the info session. I think many people have been waiting for it. I would like to again thank very much all the speakers that have joined me thus far, and then give the floor to the next set of speakers. I will be joined by Maria Fedotovaje. I hope I said that correctly. She is from the Marie Skłodowska-Curie unit at DG EAC, Education, Culture, Youth and Sport of the European Commission. And I'm also joined by Alexandra Goncalves-Pedersen. She works for REA. This is the Research Executive Agency, which basically runs the programs linked to Horizon. And Alexandra is a research program manager at REA. Both Maria and Alexandra will give us a bit of information about the background of MSCA4Ukraine and how it fits into the overall European funding frameworks. And then I'm joined by colleagues from the consortium. First of all, we have Dominique Calvait, who is the program manager for MSCA4Ukraine at Scholars at Risk Europe in Maynooth. And we are also joined by Oksana Zojmenicht, who is heading the work on MSCA4Ukraine at the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. And I just would like to take a moment and give credit where credit is due to all of the colleagues that are joining me on this panel, but particularly to my colleagues Dominic and Oksana, who are really the driving force behind this program, behind planning it and implementing it. So a virtual round of applause, please, to my colleagues, before I then give the floor to the first speaker, Maria from DG EAC's Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Unit.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep. Wonderful. As Henrietta already said, my name is Maria Fedotovaje, and I know my name, last name is not that easy to pronounce, but you did a very good job. I'm a policy officer at the Marie Skłodowska-Curie unit at the European Commission, and what I will do today in my brief presentation is give you a bit of a policy background in terms of how the scheme came about. So, MSCA4Ukraine was designed as a response to the use to the Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, to support Ukrainian researchers who were forced to flee their country. It was modeled on the main principles of Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, including excellent training opportunities, generous conditions, inclusiveness, encompassing a family and special needs allowance, encouraging intersectoral and international collaboration via secondments and otherwise, and retaining the bottom-up nature of our main actions, namely that researchers can select any area of research to pursue their project in. Also, as has been mentioned by other speakers, a very integral part of MSCA4Ukraine is supporting researchers' reintegration back in Ukraine when the safe conditions allow, whether it's via online collaboration at the moment, unfortunately for some of them, or secondments when it's safe to return back to Ukraine. We also strongly encourage cooperation with their former host institutions, their colleagues who remained in the country, and as well as those who have left. So we really want to strengthen the network of MSCA4Ukraine fellows and as well their cooperation with their counterparts back at home. Additional 10 million will enable around 50 researchers to benefit from comparable conditions as their colleagues in the first call. So I would very strongly encourage you to apply and take full advantage of the opportunities offered by the scheme. And also I would like to highlight one difference here compared to the first call is that now organizations based in UK can host researchers as well, since the United Kingdom has associated to Horizon Europe. So I will not take up more of your time because I know that everyone is very eager to find out more about nitty-gritty details of the scheme eligibility and what you need to do in order to apply. So I will now also let my colleague from the European Research Executive Agency to give you a bit more of a procedural overview of the scheme, and then our colleagues from MSCA4Ukraine Consortium to continue more detailed presentation about the scheme. Thank you so much, and I wish you a very productive info day.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Maria, for this introduction. From my side, I will be presenting in the operational aspects of the grant. Okay, so as Maria said, this is Alexandra Pedersen. I work for the European Research Executive Agency of the European Commission. And I will start by presenting some facts about this grant, the MSCA Ukraine Fellowship. So, as has been said, the aim of the grant is to support displaced researchers from Ukraine through dedicated fellowships. So, through individual fellowships, doctoral or postdoctoral. We have signed the grant agreement. The grant agreement on the 1st of July 2022 with a budget of 25 million, and the project had the initial duration of 48 months. So far, 125 fellowships have been awarded, and now there has been a top-up of 10 million that you see there. So we has been agreed a top-up of 10 million and an extension of 18 months, which will enable 50 additional researchers to get the fellowship. That was the second code that Maria was talking about. With this top-up, the total grant is now 35 million, and the duration of the program itself has a total of 66 months. The way it works is the European Commission provides funding to the MSCA Ukraine consortium, and the consortium funds institutions which are then hosting the doctoral and postdoctoral researchers. So basically on the operational side, that's basically it. I hope you could have a good idea of how it works, even though it doesn't directly affect you as an individual fellow, but just for you to understand how it works in the background. I take this opportunity as well just to talk about the Research Inquiry Service, where you can have information about the European research in general, as well as any other funding opportunities that might interest you. So I advise you to have a look to see whether there is something else that could be useful to you. So thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a very fruitful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both to Maria and to Alexandra, and for this introduction on how MSCA4Ukraine is located within the European funding frameworks. All the questions that I have, and there are many, are with regards to eligibility criteria, finding hosts, and so on, which is indeed what we will be discussing right now with the next two presentations. I don't think I have anything directed at the European Commission. Please, dear participants, if you have a question for Maria and Alexandra, they will be staying with us anyway, and also be joining us for the overall Q&A session that we have at the very end. So in case you still have something to ask to them, please feel free to do so. Wonderful, Maria and Alexandra, thanks so much. And then I would like to give the floor to my colleagues from the consortium. We're starting with Dominic from Scholars at Risk Europe. And Dominic will give us an overview of the activities that we have planned under the next wave, so to say, of MSCA4Ukraine, and also start talking a bit about the key information about fellowships and eligibility criteria. This is then followed by a brief Q&A intervention, and then we'll have a presentation from Oksana from Humboldt Foundation on application requirements, and again, a larger Q&A. So we hope to be able to pick up all your questions then, but first, Dominic, the floor is yours. Oh, I'm sorry, before I do, I need to say one more thing. I did see that in the chat, there are a few questions actually also that are directed at the speakers. If you could please post questions to the speakers in the Q&A, it just makes it a bit easier for us, i.e. me, to switch between the different screens and to really make sure that all the questions are picked up. But do keep an eye on the chat, because I've seen several European higher education institutions already posting their contact details there, looking to host researchers from Ukraine. Right, but now actually the floor is yours, Dominic.
Thanks very much. Laskavo prosimo, welcome everybody. As Henriette mentioned, I'll take the next quarter of an hour or so first to speak about the activities that are planned under MSCA4Ukraine, and secondly, to look into some key information concerning the upcoming call. Just before, allow me just 1 minute to express my gratitude to the MSCA4Ukraine team. As you have seen, we're implementing this project for nearly 2 years now. And in addition, the team has worked tirelessly for nearly a year now to prepare this upcoming call for applications and to bring it over the line. So Oksana, Frank Albrecht, Henriette, Holger Rathke, Michael Gäbel, and their colleagues at the Humboldt Foundation and EUA. My colleagues at SAR Europe, our previous director, Sinead Gorman, our current director, Frank Geary, and Sarah Field, our colleagues at the Maynooth University Research Support Office, Dr. Edward Holden and Dr. Kim Riley, and the advisory board members, the ethics advisors, and last but definitely not least, our colleagues from the European Commission, Maria Fedotovaite and Alexandra Pettersen, who just spoken before me, but of course, Claire Morel, Andrea Hutterer, Dr. Graham Wilkie, David Weisel, and Gerard Bros Perez and their colleagues. Thank you very much for your excellent collaboration. Now, let me go into the activities that are planned under MSCA for Ukraine, in addition to the fellowships that are being provided. First, there's a strong drive to support career development in terms of training, in terms of networking activities, and other professional development initiatives. The host institutions are encouraged to provide comprehensive programs of that sort for the researchers. And in addition, the consortium partners are also providing such initiatives for fellows. And wherever we can, we try to extend those opportunities, particularly training opportunities online, to researchers from Ukraine who are not benefiting from a fellowship, but who may be interested in the topics that are research related that we're providing training on. Then it's secondments. Those are optional, but again, strongly encouraged. We're encouraging host institutions and fellows to consider taking up of a third of their fellowship time for secondments in another EU member state, so not in the member state in which they're hosted, in an EU Horizon Europe associated country, including within Ukraine, if safety conditions permit that, or in other third countries. Thirdly, and this was mentioned by Igor, we support preparations for reintegration in order to prevent and avoid brain drain and support brain circulation and the exchange of European and Ukrainian research communities. So applicant organizations are strongly encouraged to take measures that would support fellows' preparation for eventual reintegration in Ukraine. And those could be maintaining the links to institutions and colleagues, double affiliations, joint supervisions, or other arrangements with an organization in Ukraine. And if you look at our MSCA for Ukraine web pages, you will find references to resources, you will find interviews also on the YouTube channel of Europe and EUA, and other useful material that can give you some good ideas of what the current fellows are doing to retain their link. A lot of them have retained strong links to Ukrainian institutions, and this is of course immensely beneficial both for them, for their host institutions, for their home institutions, and for others who are involved in these collaborations. Looking at the key informations about fellowships now, I think that is what many of the participants today have eagerly been waiting for. As was mentioned before, we're expecting to be able to fund around 50 fellowships in addition to the 125 that have been funded under the first call of MSCA that was launched in 2022. Both doctoral and postdoctoral fellowships in all areas and domains of research and innovation can be applied for, and for a period of between 6 months, so half a year, and 2 full years, 24 months. It is important to note that fellowships are non-renewable and they cannot be extended. When we look at the rates, the fellowship rates, the living allowances are aligned with those that are mentioned in the Horizon Europe Work Programme 21-22 and not in the more recently published 23-25 for MSCA, aligned to the doctoral and postdoctoral fellowship allowances there. And the reason for that is that the second call is aligned with the first call. This is an extension of the project, and we are aligning it with the first call, hence the reference to the 21-22 work program. For the adjustments, depending on the host countries, a country correction coefficient is being used, and that is explained also in the annex of the work program, where you can find the coefficient for the country of the prospective host institution. In addition, there is a fixed mobility allowance of 600 euros and, where applicable, family allowance of 660 euros per month. A special needs allowance can also be applied for if eligible. Institutional management costs are covered with a flat rate of 650 euros a month, and research, training, and networking costs, so-called RTN costs, are 1,000 euros, regardless of whether it's a doctoral or postdoctoral fellowship. Looking at the general eligibility criteria, please note that only one proposal per individual researcher can be submitted, and in case of several proposals received, only the last submitted proposal will be considered eligible. Any individual academic mentor can only support one application, but we need to clarify here that also those academic mentors who are mentors of current fellows or of fellows who have already concluded their fellowships can be a mentor of a new applicant. And if proposals with the same research objectives and work plan are submitted on behalf of different candidates, then all of these proposals will be considered ineligible. So this is very important to note. Focusing now on the locations for fellowships, prospective host organizations established in EU member states or Horizon Europe associated countries are eligible to apply, except when they're subject to any of the European Union's restrictive measures. And to view all these this information in detail, please have a look at our website. The webpage Information for Applicants provides the link to all the relevant documents of this call, and specifically have a look at the terms of reference for applicants, where you find all the detailed information and references in the document that you need to look for. You will also find information in the frequently asked questions sections, FAQ webpage on the MSCA4Ukraine website. I will continue here with the most pertinent information. The standard MSCA mobility rules do not apply for the MSCA4Ukraine scheme, but the principle of mobility applies, and this means that primary host institutions must be outside of Ukraine. But, as I mentioned earlier, institutions in Ukraine could act as secondment institutions for fellowships, up to a third of the overall fellowship period, contributing to maintaining a strong link between the fellows, the host institutions, and the secondment institution in Ukraine. And we strongly encourage this. When it comes to the eligibility criteria for host institutions, both academic and non-academic organizations are eligible, and the definitions of academic and non-academic institutions, again, is found in the terms of references for applicants on our webpage. It is a mono-beneficiary action. That means that applications must be submitted by a single independent legal entity established in an EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country, meaning those that are eligible, those countries that are eligible to apply. And as Maria mentioned in her presentation, this includes organizations based in the UK. Please note that there is a limit of 2 million euros to be awarded to any one organization, and that comprises both eventual funding that was already awarded under the first call and funding that they would apply for and eventually be awarded under the second call. The total needs to be not exceeding 2 million euros. And this is my last slide, focusing on eligibility criteria for researchers. And those researchers are eligible who had their primary residence in Ukraine on the first day of the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation in Ukraine, which was 24th February 22. And they need to be either Ukrainian nationals, stateless persons, or nationals from third countries other than Ukraine. So this is not a fellowship scheme for Ukrainian researchers, but for researchers from Ukraine whose primary residence was in Ukraine on 24th February 22. Researchers are eligible who have been displaced from Ukraine on or after the 24th February of 2022. Our current and former MSCA4Ukraine fellows, please note that you are not eligible to be nominated for under the second call. Candidates must be either postdoctoral researchers on the date of the call deadline, which will be 5th September 2024. More specifically, the portal will close at the last minute of that day at 23 hours and 59 minutes, or researchers who on or after 24th February 22 were enrolled as doctoral candidates at a higher educational institution in Ukraine. The host institutions are responsible to ensure that candidates possess the language skills that are needed to successfully conduct their research activities at the organization in the host country. Thank you, Henrietta, and I think we can now move to the first Q&A.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Dominic. A lot of the questions that have been posted now in the Q&A were already collected in the background. And indeed, you addressed most of them already in your presentation. But maybe just to reiterate on some of them, we could still go through some of them before moving on to Oksana's presentation, which will be more on the application side. And then we will come back and try to, answer all of them, even if they came up in the presentation, just to reiterate. Participants, you may have noticed, I see that some of you already did so, you can upvote questions. So by putting like, it will, go higher in the list. This helps us picking questions that are relevant for you. And the first two questions that I have here that are upvoted by participants are indeed on the eligibility of Ukrainians currently residing in Ukraine or currently displaced within Ukraine. Dominic, I know you just said it, but would you perhaps again reiterate on the regulation with regards to this aspect of eligibility?
Sure. So the call focuses on supporting researchers that have been displaced on or after the first day of the full-scale invasion, meaning 24th February 22.
Yeah, yes, thanks, Dominic. So apologies to colleagues that indeed we can only support researchers that have already left Ukraine on or after this particular date. This would be the first set of questions. I think then I had quite a set of questions with regards to the eligibility of particular countries. UK was mentioned several times. This is especially because in the last round, we were not able to fund applications for researchers to be hosted in the UK. Indeed, this is now possible. I'd like to underline this again. But there were also other countries mentioned in the list of questions here. Just to pick a couple of particular ones that popped up, Israel, Canada, are those countries eligible, Dominic?
I need to check the list of Horizon Europe associated countries, but that is referenced in the terms of reference for applicants.
Okay.
So all the details there are what matters. Whichever country is not in Horizon Europe associated country for MSCA is not eligible to apply for this call.
Okay. Very good. It was also mentioned briefly by you, but just to underline, I had some questions from different participants with regards to already being funded, either being already funded by MSCA4Ukraine currently, or being funded by other fellowships specifically for Ukrainian researchers or other national fellowship schemes in Europe. Are those researchers eligible to apply, Dominic?
So what matters for MSCA4Ukraine is you are not eligible to apply under this call if you are or have been already benefiting from a MSCA4Ukraine fellowship. So our fellows that have been awarded as a result of the first call that was launched in 2022 cannot apply for another fellowship.
Okay, very good. However, for those that are under other fellowship programs,
as long as they fit all the other eligibility criteria, yes, of course, they are eligible.
Very good. Okay, let me see. I'm trying to group those questions currently supported by Philip Schwartz Initiative, for instance, from AVH. If they fulfill all other criteria, they would be eligible to apply. There are several people asking about limitations around the number of years after they have defended their PhD. Someone mentioned specifically it's been 20 years, for example. Can a scientist who defended his or her PhD 20 years ago apply to the program, given all other criteria would fit?
Well, generally speaking, don't have restrictions of that sort in the call.
I think so too. Very good. And last but not least, maybe that's an interesting one. Am I eligible for MSCA4Ukraine application if I have already applied for MSCA last year and did not pass, or if I applied in the last round and the application was, voted as favorable, but unfortunately we could not fund it. As you may remember, we issued a certificate of excellence. I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong word now. Are those people able to apply again with the same or with a different application, Dominic?
So two points here. The first one is you are not eligible if you were awarded a fellowship. Right. Other than that, if you had applied and it was declined, or it was successful, it could not be funded because of the financial limitations, then you can apply again. Those who scored particularly high in the last round of during call 1 and received the Accolade of Excellence certification can apply again under call 2. There is a specific reference in the frequently asked questions, question number 24, that refers to this, and I know this by heart because I have been asked via email by Accolade holders just recently. And again, reference is made to the terms of references for applicants found on the MSCA4Ukraine web pages, where everything is listed in detail. Remind me of the second part of the question.
No, I think you addressed it, Dominic. Thank you so much. I'm also at the same time trying to go through the number of questions that are coming in. But anyway, we will open the floor again after Oksana's presentation.
If I can just interrupt.
Yes.
The second part of the question was whether someone can apply again with the same proposal.
With the same proposal, that was right, yes.
And it is at the discretion of the host institution and collaborating candidate what they're applying with. So if it's the same proposal, then I would consider that it probably might require some updating, but it might be an entirely different proposal. But that is at the discretion of the applicant to decide on this. We are not giving any suggestions in this regard. What we can say is applications that have already been submitted under the first call, and including those that have scored high and were not awarded funding, can need to decide whether they want to go with the same proposal or submit an entirely new proposal, adjust the proposal that they had already submitted, updated. Whatever it is at the discretion of the applicant.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dominic, for summing this up. More questions are coming in, but I'd like to first give the floor now to our colleague Oksana, who will take you through some further details on how to apply to the scheme before we open the floor to all speakers of this part of the webinar to address further questions that are coming in. And thanks to the participants for your active participation so far. Oksana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So welcome everybody, and I only can join all the thanks that Dominic said and all our previous speakers, to all the members of the team, in particular also here at the Humboldt Foundation, our colleagues who are tirelessly really committed helping us establishing the scheme also in terms of operational implementation and the IT level. This is an extremely challenging project, but they are really helping us so much. So now I'll be just going through the details related to the application process, and then hopefully I can reply to the questions. So as you know already from the also provisional information published at the end of May, the portal for applications will open on the 5th of August. So basically you have all information relevant to the call already now published. You can prepare, and then starting from the 1st of August, you would be able to submit. We will publish the link to the portal on our webpage, which would be also directly given at the SAR Europe webpage. So basically information for applicants. Immediately there would be a link where you can go register in the portal and apply. And I'll provide further details how exactly this process works. And the portal will be opened until 5th of September, until the midnight. And please note that if you require in last minute technical support, anything, of course, staff would not be available there. So we strongly encourage everybody to prepare everything ahead of the time and submit it in sort of working hours in case something doesn't work and you want to ask a question. Our team would be supporting all the technical questions as well, but of course within reasonable working hours. And from the experience of different application schemes, it's basically an exponential rise in the application. So like 3 days before the deadline, there is like maybe 10%, and then everything comes in the last minute. I really strongly encourage you not to wait till the last minute. There is sufficient time, in my view, to upload things beforehand, save them in the system, and make sure that everything is prepared beforehand, because system could be updating or whatever, and you don't want to be disappointed, put all the hard work into preparing the application and then not being able to submit. So the application itself must be submitted by the prospective host institution. So the applicant for us and later the grantee is the host organization. And this application is submitted on behalf of the eligible researcher, who we call the candidate. So it's not the researcher themselves who submit the application, but the host organization. So the applicant organization has to appoint a contact point, project management, who would be serving as a first contact point for us at the stage of the application. So this is very important that this person is employed by the host organization. So a contact person from the host organization is the one who is submitting the application. So there are a number of mandatory documents and some optional. So the mandatory is, of course, the online application form, and a sample of it is published. Because we are still refining some technical processes, there might be some minor changes, but the basic structure and information provided there would be remaining like we already published. So one has to fill in this application form. There are different steps where the additional information is required from other people. So please go through it and make sure that you are aware, because it takes time for different steps. You have to have a copy of the doctoral certificate for the candidates who already have a doctoral certificate. So the line of funding for postdoctoral fellows, so people with a PhD. And please, specifically for Ukrainian researchers, we are talking about Kandidat Nauk, PhD, and not the Doctor of Science. If you have a degree of Doctor of Science, it's good, but this is not what is relevant here. So the first academic degree, which is equivalent to PhD, this is what is required. Or for candidates, so doctoral candidates, it's an enrollment certificate confirming the PhD status. And then a copy of document proving the identity of the candidate. For candidates who were residing in Ukraine who are not Ukrainian nationals. So for Ukrainian nationals, it could be just a copy of the passport. But for non-Ukrainian nationals, they have to provide additionally confirmation that they were residing in Ukraine at the date indicated. And this all has to be uploaded as one single PDF document. And then there are a number of templates which are published on our webpage. One is eligibility self-disclosure statement, and I'll go through these documents one by one. So then the application itself, which consists of 2 parts, and they have to be uploaded independently and filled in independently. There are 2 statements from the host organization, which has to be uploaded by the contact person into the system. And this is a statement from academic mentor. So when you are filling the form, once you included the details of the academic mentor, the mentor will get the message to upload the statement and confirm also the data protection statement. And this is important because it's confidential. And of course, you need to ensure that the person is there, not on holidays, and basically there is sufficient time. And there is an ethics self-assessment form. Even if your application has, in your view, no ethical issues, you have to fill this form and upload it. So these are mandatory documents that have to be uploaded or prepared and submitted, based also on the templates that we provide with all the specific requirements indicated in the templates. And if you would not follow the indicated requirements, we reserve the right to refuse the application on the formal grounds. So if it says a certain number of pages, it should not be more. If it says a certain font, it should be adhered to. So you have to basically adhere to the rules, so it's a fair competition for everybody. There are also optional documents, for example, full list of publications of the candidate. It's optional because in the application form, in the templates, we also request for information on achievements of the candidate. And for very junior candidates, they might only have one paper. So basically, you don't need to provide this in a separate format. But of course, for senior researchers, there would be insufficient space to include all what they believe is relevant. So then they can fill this full list of publications. This is only relevant at a later stage of evaluation. I'll go to that point later. And in case in the ethics self-assessment form, you indicate any information relevant from the ethical point of view, there are specific requirements what further information you have to provide. And you don't need to provide it in the application, but anything related to ethics you should provide in a separate document, and there is a possibility for you to upload this additional ethics related information document. And it's not limited in space. You can include like consent forms or licenses for animal research or any other relevant information. So this we have to collect at the application stage. You don't need to have already all the licenses in the application stage, but basically the information which is indicated in the ethics self-assessment form should be provided in this additional ethics-related information. So I will not stop in more detail on the ethics, but in the future webinars, in case this is of particular relevance, we could also address. So this stage, this is the overview, and now I'll just go a little bit in more detail for specific documents. So the application form itself, it's a formal document which is very relevant for us and to enable us to process the data and have all the relevant data in our system. It includes contact details of the head of the host organization, the project manager, the academic mentor, the candidate researcher on behalf of whom this application is made, and if applicable, contact person for ethics. So if there are any ethical issues indicated in self-assessment form, ideally you identify the contact person for ethics, fill this form together with them, provide sufficient additional information, and should this application be selected for funding, there might be additional issues that we would need to clarify before funding could be awarded, and for that we need this contact person. So this is important that you already at this stage could indicate, so it would speed up things later on, but this is only relevant, of course, for a certain number of applicants. In our first call, this was around half of them. Additionally, in the application form, you would indicate relevant information on what duration, on tentative starting date, what disciplinary area and pre-selection review panel. I'll stop on that a little bit later. Title and brief outline of the research project, up to 5 keywords, and summary of this ethics self-assessment. So we already in the form can see very quickly for whom it's relevant, and agreement to terms and conditions. So this is very important. So without agreeing to terms of conditions, the application could not be submitted. So when you submit the application, in this round, we had to develop a 2-stage evaluation process. So the concept is that it's 1-stage application, but 2-stage evaluation process possible. We have uncertainty what number of applications we will receive based on the many different factors, and also knowledge of many schemes that basically now are finishing, and Ukrainian researchers are not supported by the emergency funds. We expect a rather large number of applications. This is why we have developed a 2-stage evaluation process, which we might deploy if we really receive a very large number of applications. And because we know how much money we have, which is for about 50 fellowships, and this number comes from uncertainty, of course, of the duration of the fellowships that people will apply for, also what countries, because there are different coefficients. So based on that information, we just tentatively can assess that it's about 50. But if we receive around 200 applications, we would proceed with one-step evaluation process like in the first call. Should there be a larger number of applications, a two-stage application, two-stage evaluation process would be deployed. And for this reason, we need you at the stage of application indicate panel. And these panels are, so it's a pre-selection panel, which are aligned with standard MSCA panels. This is slightly extended, which we just checked the number of applications we had, and we knew that, for example, in humanities or in life sciences, there is a really large number of applications, so we split them. But this is basically aligned with the standard Marie Curie panels. So as one of the documents you need to fill, and this is a mandatory document, it's this eligibility self-disclosure statement. So for us to have all information necessary to quickly assess the eligibility, there are sometimes a need for additional information. So you would, as a Ukrainian national, it's of course not automatic that you were living in Ukraine, so you have to provide the confirmation that your primary residence on the date of the full-scale war was in Ukraine, indicate date of departure from Ukraine, and in case this was just before the war, for reasons which were maybe a one-week holiday or conference or some very short-term collaborative reasons, you may be considered eligible. We would consider it at a case-by-case basis, but you have to provide sufficient information so we can see that your primary residence, which is eligibility requirement, was in Ukraine, and the fact that on the date you were not in Ukraine is basically due to justifiable reason. This is, we might need to carry out further inquiries before we really can ascertain your eligibility, but filling this self-disclosure, eligibility self-disclosure statement and providing additional information would be extremely helpful for us. For PhD candidates, we require you to explain your situation because our eligibility criteria refers to PhD students who were enrolled in Ukraine. So we can imagine that somebody was enrolled just before the war and then basically left Ukraine, had to was displaced, and that enrollment is not current anymore, but they were enrolled at the time. Then they are eligible, but somebody might have started the PhD already after the war, but then had to break it or something. So we need to know better, and only you can explain your situation. And in this document, you can attach the relevant documents, what you feel is relevant, and this should be submitted as one single PDF. So not individual documents, there is no possibility to do like each individual document, but as a package. So when we have it, we can very efficiently judge and, if necessary, contact you for further clarifications. The application process in terms of the proposal itself. There is an application outline, which is a part 1 application, which is basically relevant for this pre-selection stage. And then there is a full application proposal, which is relevant for the full evaluation stage. I'll start with the full application proposal simply because this is how I would advise you to start. It has the same chapters as the outline, but you basically have here more space and fewer limitations. And this part, this is where you write your proposal for experts in your field, people who really working close to the field where you carry out your research. So the text, that the language you should be using, the arguments you should be bringing is addressed at researchers in your field. So you have a part which relates to the research proposal itself, and it's maximum 5 pages. There are limitations on font and frames, and it provides information in the template what exactly we expect you, because for reviewers it is really helpful when it's structured in a similar way, so they can compare different applications and they get all information that is relevant for them. There is a part related to your curriculum vitae and track record, which is in this case is maximum 4 pages, where you indicate your education and your qualifications, and then you indicate research achievements and peer recognition, and then additional relevant information. And it specifies in the template what we mean by research achievements and peer recognition, and we strongly encourage you also to provide additional information explaining why you believe this is an achievement and what was your role. So if it's a Nature paper where you are a co-author, you have to provide some detail what contribution you made to that particular research. And then there is up to 2 pages a motivation statement, which should explain what is expected impact of this fellowship for you, for your professional development. It should also provide information explaining your specific situation, because it provides the context relevant for reviewers. So if somebody was displaced already from Donbass in 2014 and for a few years could not publish, and only later established career somewhere in other part of Ukraine, started to publish and now was displaced again, of course the publication record would be different from those who maybe were not affected in that way. Without this additional information, a reviewer could not see it. So this is the space where you provide that context, which is relevant for the reviewers to judge if your achievement is adequate for your career stage, and it's really an excellent career of a researcher in that particular research field. And there is also a brief description of your plans to reintegrate with Ukraine, support interaction or links with Ukrainian organizations, because this is a very important part of our fellowship. So basically in this part, which you write with keeping in mind reviewers in your field, you provide sufficient details. And then when I go back to the application outline, this part is basically a shorter version of that. So as you see, the proposal should be maximum 2 pages, the track record and curriculum vitae maximum 2 pages, and statement maximum 1 page. And this would be read by evaluators within the panels, and they are of course very broad. So for this part, you should then basically use your full proposal, but make it simplified in terms of being understandable by researchers in a broader research area. So it would not be that a historian would read a mathematics proposal, but it's basically any mathematicians should understand why your research is excellent and why your career and your track record is adequate. So that is just, I'll talk in a minute about evaluation criteria, and this is a strong advice for you. They are published, that you keep them in front of you when you're preparing your application, because you need to see how they would be evaluated. So let me move further. Then we expect 2 statements from host institution. Very important that this is provided on the organization's letterhead and signed by the legally authorized person who authorizes this nomination. And in the template that we provided, it explains basically what we want to be addressed in this statement. And I'm not going in all the detail here, unless later we have some questions. And it's very important that it confirms that you would be employed with all social benefits, and for the full duration of the fellowship, also for any time that might be spent on any secondment and any other organization. So this is very important legally, because the organization that applies is it's an organization commitment. And then there is a statement from the mentor. Again, the same, it's up to 2 pages. This is much more where the mentor assesses your potential, but also explains how scientific match, or maybe you're bringing complementary skills to the lab, and also what support they will provide to you as a researcher, but also in terms of complementary skills. So again, in the template published on our webpage, we provide very specific questions that should be addressed in these statements. Now I'll move to evaluation and selection process. So the timeline is published on our webpage. As I mentioned, depending on the volume of application, we might proceed with a single stage application if we will receive under 200 applications, which I personally believe is unrealistic, but this is, we need to see. And in case it's a larger number, we will then take a decision to proceed a 2-stage evaluation. So in August, your application will start to arrive. Until 5th of September, we'll be starting with eligibility checks. You might be already then getting some inquiries in case we have questions. And then starting from October to December, we plan this stage 1 evaluation, which would be conducted by external experts within 10 of those broad research area pre-selection review panels. And their objective is to identify the most promising applications from the pool within that panel, which should be put forward for the full evaluation within the 2nd stage. Within this 1st stage, they would be reviewed by at least 2 panel members of each panel. They might be also discussed when the panel would be deciding on the final ranking. At this stage, the panelists will only score them and not provide any written comments on the applications. We do expect a very large number, and this is also operationally has to be manageable in a reasonable time. In case it's a cross-disciplinary application, you have a chance to indicate another panel, and we may seek advice or evaluation from a member of another panel. So if this is strongly interdisciplinary research, the opinion of a member of a different panel would be sought. As I mentioned, only scores will be collected, and then we foresee the process in such a way that once we know the total number of the applications, and we know that we want to proceed to the 2nd stage for the full evaluation with a number which is about 3, maximum 4 times the number of fellowships that we have, that would define a percentage that should be put for this full evaluation. And we want to ensure that irrespective of the panel or your research field, a researcher has a similar chance to be fully evaluated. So the same percentage of applications would be put forward for the full evaluation from different panels. So this is the role of the 1st stage. And then basically in December, if we have to deploy the 2-stage evaluation process, we should then be able to inform everybody if they were successful to proceed to the 2nd stage or unfortunately not. And then we will be able to proceed to the full evaluation, which is very similar to what we did in the 1st round, which is also very similar to the standard Marie Curie Sklodowska-Curie application process, where we would be seeking expert evaluations from specific fields relevant for your research, and from 3 external experts, where both scores and written reports will be collected. This will take time, as we know, and we expect, this is a tentative schedule, we would do our best to do it as quick as possible, but based on our experience, we expect that in March we could finalize the selection. The applications then, so the awards would be then made. The selection is done by selection committee based on the evaluation and ranking provided by the external experts, and then we expect that the first fellows can start in April, and the window for starting the fellowship we foresee between April and June. So please keep this in mind. There could be some exceptions in some very exceptional cases, but this is the standard. And given that the project itself has a limited duration, we have to adhere to that. So if there is some funding you have and it's much, much longer and you can potentially only start a year later, we would not be able to wait. Applicants from the reserve list will be offered funding should any awarded fellowships offers be declined. So based on our experience, I mean, very good candidates usually, of course, also are successful with other funding. And by the time the funding decision is taken, some people have other offers. So we had a certain number of applications that we could award from the reserve list. And this is open-end until we basically disbursed all our funding. Now I'll briefly explain the evaluation criteria and scores, and then we can have some questions and answers. So for the stage 1, should we deploy it, we would only use 2 criteria, excellence and impact, and they are equally weighted. And please keep this in mind when you would be formulating the part 1, the application outline, because there you really have to show the excellence and the impact. For the stage 2, it's 3 criteria, like we had in the first round, excellence and impact weight at the same weight of 35% and implementation at 30%. The scores ranging between 0 and 5. And for those who would be fully evaluated, in order to be considered for funding, they need to score more than 10.5 points, which is basically 70%. But importantly, also for each individual criteria, they should score more than 3.5 points. So this is very important. It's not just a total number, but it's also for each individual criteria, it should be above this number. So technically, everybody who scores more than 70% and has the highest score for each criteria higher than 3.5 is fundable. And then it's just a question when the money finishes, who is higher on the ranking. But those who are below this, they are technically not fundable. And now I'll just quickly go through the criteria. They are published in the terms of reference. Please keep them in front of you when you're preparing your application, because you should look at it from the point of view of the person who would be evaluating it. So the stage 1, the excellence part, there are 3 sub-criteria. 1 related to the research proposal itself, how excellent it is in terms of its ambition and feasibility of the approaches, and contribution to the research field. And for PhD candidates, if this is real evidence of the first significant contribution to the research. Then there is a sub-criteria on the candidate itself in terms of evidence that they really able to carry out outstanding research. And for PhD candidates and early career researchers, and we included the definition how we understand this, is there clear evidence of a starting upward trajectory or potential for future research accomplishment. So reviewers would have to judge what you provided as evidence, if this is relevant for your career stage. And also here, it's the match between you and or a researcher, the candidate, and the mental lab where they are going to carry out research, and the host organization providing support. So this is the part which basically shows, okay, it's a great project, it's a great researcher, but it's not really suitable environment. So this could be the case. In terms of impact, there are 2 sub-criteria. 1 relates to the impact of this award on the candidate's professional development, and another on potential impact on research and innovation system of Ukraine. So if you can show that there are measures through secondment or through other measures of developing collaboration, this is a very important part for the impact. For the second stage, for the full evaluation, the 3 criteria, as I already outlined. The first one, basically excellence focuses only on research proposal and the candidate track record. The impact criteria is the same, so it's basically candidates' professional development and the impact of this fellowship for research and innovation system of Ukraine. And then importantly, in the implementation part, it's the part about the match. So in the full application, this is what would be evaluated here, how good research environment is suitable for this research, how credible and feasible research itself is, and also deliberation on duration. So you should make a case, especially for PhD candidates, if they are maybe at the very end of their fellowship and only need a few months to finish it, it might be not very reasonable if they're applying for 2 years or other way around. So one has to explain basically the duration you apply for. So I'm finishing here. There are frequently asked questions on our webpage, and we will be updating them also after this event, so continuously. And we plan at the moment 2 more sessions before like big summer break, where we would be very much open to answer your very specific questions. And then in August, once portal is opened, we also would plan some events, and we'll be publishing the links on our webpage for you. So also, we would be answering your inquiries, and hopefully through the sessions, we can answer your questions. So I'm finishing. Thank you. And I'm open for your questions.
Very good. Thanks so much, Oksana. Hang on, I am here as well. Very good. Thank you, Oksana, for providing this overview of how to apply and how your application will be evaluated. And I think you mentioned this several times, but I like to reiterate that, of course, especially with regards to this eligibility criteria, the applications should be written with those in mind. We have had about 200 questions coming in, and I now have the difficult task to summarize them and try to address all of them or most of them. And I'm joined here by all colleagues on the panel. Colleagues, you know there's an internal chat, and I would like to ask you to look at it because I asked you some questions. But then I would just like to go over and have a look at the Q&A section of this event. Oksana mentioned that you can ask further questions into events and that there is a FAQ. We will actually use all the questions that came in today to review the FAQ. So please bear that in mind, but we will try and do our best now to address the questions that were asked here. I'll start with questions that came in on links to Ukrainian home institutions. We had several related to this area. Oksana just mentioned in her presentation, impact on Ukraine research is a part of the eligibility criteria. So we had several people actually asking about their previous links to home institutions. For instance, whether they need to be affiliated currently with the Ukraine institution or before the date that they have left Ukraine, whether they currently would have needed to be employed by a Ukraine institution, and also whether it has to be a higher education institution, or whether this could have been also a Ukrainian institute, such as the National Science Foundation. Let's start with this one. It's all around a connection to Ukraine in terms of eligibility. Oksana, would you like to start?
Yeah, so any research in Ukraine, so this could be Academy of Sciences, specific institutions, research institutions which are relevant to particular ministries, and also higher education institutions. This also could be non-academic organizations. So European funding is generally very open for innovative research. There are also think tanks where political research provides some input for policymakers. So there is no requirement for you formally being either have been employed by a research organization, academic research organization in Ukraine before or now at the time when you apply. Important is that you carry out research or are planning to carry out research, and you either have already some links or you are prepared to establish them and you make a case, and this is what evaluators would be judging.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for addressing this question. Would someone else like to comment on this? No, very good. Then I'll move on to the next set of questions. We had quite a number of questions around mobility requirements. People are generally aware that MSCA, Marine Sklodowska reactions, have a mobility requirement, but as we already hinted at, this is in a way waived, and there were several questions related to this in the Q&A and also in the chat. For instance, can researchers that are currently already located and perhaps even working in a European or Horizon associated countries apply for this call? What if they're already working at a European higher education institution? Can they apply to continue their work there, or do they have to move to a different country? Dominic or Oksana?
To start with the last one, they can continue, they can apply with that institution. As I said in my presentation, the principle of mobility of the mobility rule does not apply, other than applicant researchers can no longer be in Ukraine, as the call focuses on displaced researchers.
Exactly, and I think it's also very much understandable once people were forcefully displaced, there is no requirement that they now have to uproot, take their children from German school and move to Ireland and start doing all over again. So in this particular case, the classic requirement of Marie Curie scheme, where you're not allowed up to more than 1 year to be in the host organization, completely does not apply. This is an emergency scheme for displaced researchers from Ukraine, and this is to support them.
Okay, wonderful. Following on this then, and just to really underline this point, what if someone is, for instance, we had 2 people that said they're currently doing a PhD at a university. Can they then apply for a postdoc with the same university? They have currently an ongoing project funded by the university or another research program. Can they also apply?
This is completely irrelevant. As long as they are basically comply with our eligibility criteria, which are very clearly stipulated, they are eligible.
Very good. That is good to know. Let me see. I tried to group the questions as best as I could. So sorry for the participants that I'm not actually reading out your questions. We had also quite a number of questions with regards to finding higher education institutions. Now, I would like to remind our participants that in the chat, actually, there were several colleagues of European universities that said, please contact me here if you're interested to do a research project on XYZ topic I am willing to host. So please do have a look at the chat if you're a researcher and potentially there is already a match. Dominic, Oksana, how can researchers find a host institution? Do we have a list?
So perhaps I can start on this. During the first call, we had provided matchmaking services with an understanding that researchers from Ukraine might not necessarily have connections to research institutions in eligible European countries or Horizon Europe associated countries that they could benefit from to develop a joint proposal. However, there was ultimately a limited uptake only on in the sense that a lot of expressions of interest were registered, particularly from host institutions, but there was a very small uptake when we looked at the actual proposals submitted to the scheme. So considering that we're 2 years in the full-scale war now, practically, well, exceeding actually more than 2 years, it is assumed that a number of researchers who have been displaced have already forged connections, relationships with institutions that they might jointly apply with. Hence the reasoning for us not to provide matchmaking services at this stage. One suggestion could be to directly approach the institution that potential candidates, researchers from Ukraine would want to submit a proposal jointly with, and then pursue it from there.
I can just quickly add, European Union created this Era for Ukraine platform where many national initiatives and also, for example, ERC for Ukraine initiative where ERC grantees are very happy to host fellows within their funding and of course also with additional funding. So this is where you can start looking. This is excellent research. And of course, there is Science for Ukraine grassroots initiative that also was at some point collecting offers from international researchers who were very interested to support in all possible ways. So until now, there are very divergent level of schemes also nationally. So, and of course, each situation is very different. There are different factors affecting location and the research field, but that's basically for researchers to explore the resources available. This is incomparable to what was 2 years ago, but by now we believe that there is really sufficient information provided.
And just perhaps to add to what Oksana just said, if you go on the MSCA4Ukraine website on the web page called Resources, you will also find references to those that Oksana has just mentioned.
Also, at our Humboldt Foundation webpage, we had some expressions of interest, and this was collected at some point. You just need to explore.
Thanks so much, colleagues. I have a number of questions coming in with regards to very specific aspects of the eligibility criteria. So if you don't mind, we'll just go through the ones that I can identify and that might be relevant to others as well. We have several people asking about the required number of years of research experience, required number of publications and so on for the application. I know Oksana already shaking her head, but please could you reiterate that point? And if I tag onto this to group questions a little bit, I had one that just came in that asks, what is the expected impact of a fellowship for PhD students expected to finish PhD in the frame of the project? Can this be guaranteed, or what are the steps there?
So if I may, there are no specific requirements, and this is I don't know, people always complain why there's only 5 years after PhD, but if there are no limit, then it's like also threatening. It's open, but it's for you to make the case that what you have achieved and what are your research achievements and how significant they are. And this is relevant to your career stage and for your research field. So in some research fields, maybe it's not necessarily a Nature paper, but maybe it's a policy recommendation that was implemented. If you're a PhD student, having one paper is already great. If you're 10 years research experience and have one paper and maybe not even first author, then it's not very impressive. So this is really for you to make a case why you as a researcher have adequate skills and can be judged as excellent, and why the research that you are proposing is excellent. But there are no formal requirements. In the application form for part 1, for pre-selection, we do ask to provide information for junior researchers, so PhD students and early career researchers up to 5 achievements, and for senior researchers up to 10 achievements. But in the full form, it's not limited, and it's for you to decide. You just need to fit the space, and this is you deciding what is relevant. You don't have to have 5 if you have only 3, but they are great. Maybe you put startup or something. This is you need to make the case, but there are no formal requirements on that in that regard.
Thank you, Oksana. I now have a question that I might start giving it to the European Commission and Research Executive Agency. There was 2 very interesting questions that might be relevant to all our participants. I'll start with one of them. Is it possible to submit the same proposal to MSCA4Ukraine and then also submit the same one to the regular MSCA program? Maybe a question for Maria and or Alexandra?
Well, I can take that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is possible, but what is not possible to have both fellowships at that same time.
So we will try and make sure that this would not be the case, of course. Yes. Very good. linking on to this, then Dominic, Oksana, or colleagues from the Commission, could you explain the situation that we did have a large number of excellent applications the last time around and that could not be funded, unfortunately? What can they do then in terms of applying to other programs? Could you explain that? Will we do this again?
So, you want to start? Shall I start?
Dominic, start.
Okay, we had, after the results of the first call, issued a certification that is aligned to the Seal of Excellence, since MSCA4Ukraine is a particular scheme within the broader envelope of MSCA. We could not award the Seal of Excellence, but we have developed a certificate called the Equivalent of Excellence, which is largely aligned and which had been acknowledged by a number of countries where Seal of Excellence schemes are implemented. And in fact, we had a number of success stories there. 5 research projects were awarded in Sweden. To mention perhaps the most successful, that had applied for MSCA4Ukraine, had received excellent results but could not be funded because of the limitations in terms of financing. So there are possibilities to apply elsewhere that researchers made use of through the Equivalent of Excellence.
Thank you, Dominic, the Equivalent of Excellence. Oksana, would you like to add something, or?
I could only say, of course, those who unfortunately were not successful in the first round could apply, even those who were offered and had to decline for whatever reasons. So basically only those who were really funded are not eligible. Everybody else is eligible to apply. And of course, as with research funding, one has to try. We expect a very high number of applications, so you need to judge the effort and the success rate and the time scale, but the scheme is open.
Thanks so much, Oksana. Perhaps another question that I first would like to pose to the Commission and Rhea. It is eligibility related, but maybe we can also hear from the Commission how this looks from their perspective. We had 2 or 3 non-Ukrainians that before the start of the war were living in Ukraine, working in Ukraine. One of them particularly also mentioned married to a Ukraine national, non-European, so third country nationals. Would they be eligible for the scheme? Yes or no? I don't know if the Commission would like to come in. Otherwise, I would give this question also to my colleagues from ZAUR or Humboldt Foundation.
I mean, I can add, and then if colleagues from the consortium would like to complement, feel free. I think this is clearly already stated in the, call description. So the conditions are that it's both nationals and long-term residents. So I hope that answers it.
Just it's not only Ukrainian nationals; it's also
yes. That's what long-term residents. That's what I meant. Yes.
Right. Yes. Right. So Ukrainian nationals, stateless persons, or persons of third countries whose primary residence was in Ukraine on the 24th of February 22.
Oksana, please.
Maybe just a little comment, because we had inquiry from somebody who was a third national in Ukraine, a student, undergraduate student. These people, basically, they are eligible in terms of residency, but they're not eligible because they were not PhD student or are not postdoctoral. So basically, you have to fulfill all the eligibility criteria. So this is what is relevant.
Excellent. Thanks so much for underlining this point again as well. Okay, and there was also one question. It was just one, but I thought it was an interesting one in terms of eligibility, because I have not thought about it in this way yet in the consortium. Is it possible to submit as a higher education institution one single application for one research project involving 2 researchers from Ukraine, but only 1 mentor and 1 research project? Would that work? It was a question asked by University of Bremen, who seems to have something very concrete already in mind.
So maybe I'll try to explain. there could be a research project on which it is planned that 2 researchers would be working and each of them would be doing their own research part. This should be self-standing projects. So in that case, one university can nominate 2 researchers with 2 research projects that if they are successful with both of them, they together would make something great. If these research projects are written in such a way that one can't exist without another, so one is providing technique and another is doing some calculations or whatever, this we could not assess because we are not assessing collaborations between potential applicants. They have to be standalone projects. So if this is how you could formulate them, that if only one succeeds, it can go ahead, or you would secure another funding, because evaluators could comment and say, okay, the project is great, but it's dependent on the other, and if another is not funded, it's a risk. And this could be then, implementation basically would not be assessed highly. This is one possibility. Another possibility that could be, maybe my understanding is wrong, that it's like exactly the same project, but we have 2 candidates and we're just betting which of them can get it. This is not allowed. So if there are 2 researchers submitting exactly the same proposal, then both of them would be considered ineligible, and this is in line with the standard MSCA rules.
Perhaps to add to this, the one mentor could not be the mentor for 2 applicants, for 2 applicant candidates.
It would have to be 2 mentors. Okay, thank you for clarifying this very important point. And Dominic, as we are on this, could you reiterate the number of researchers one university is allowed to support? As this
the limitations that are in place are related to funding, up to 2 million euros per applicant organization. That includes funding that they may have received already, awarded under the first call off that was published in 22. So if they received a previous MSCA4Ukraine fellowship project or more than one, they would need to take this into account to consider the 2 million ceiling per organization.
Excellent. And in practice, Dominic, what would that normally mean? Different things. Depends on the
it depends on the country where the host institution is located. It depends on whether the candidate, the researcher, would be receiving family allowance, a special needs allowance. So there are some variables that would not allow me to give you a specific answer. It is it is the onus of the host institution to the applicant host institution to make sure that they would not exceed this.
Thanks so much for this clarification, Dominic. It's very important points. We are running out of time, even though there's still some questions left. I think I want to pick up one more before I close the webinar today. And this would be with regards to male researchers who are based in Ukraine. Now, we already reiterated several times that people who apply to the scheme must have been displaced. But what if they return to Ukraine afterwards and they're male? Are they eligible to apply? And if so, is it possible to negotiate border crossing?
So I can only comment that if the formal requirements in terms of being resident in Ukraine, having the required status as a postdoctoral researcher or PhD student, and the person was displaced on or after the war, and there is no requirement where then they resided all that time, technically they could be eligible. The regulation, the national regulations of the country, we have to respect, and if there are restrictions on movement, and unfortunately we have to say that although the previous eligibility requirements were different and a few fellows have managed then also to pick up and carry the project, some people had to decline. In current situation, one has to assess, we can't do anything which is against the national regulations and national law. And we know that it's a martial law, and basically even if person is technically eligible, applies with an excellent project and it is funded, and this person can't take it, unfortunately we would need to then offer it to another candidate.
Yep. Thank you, Oksana, and everyone to answering this and all the other questions. Gemma, if I could have my slides, please, again. I would like to now close this webinar, and just to give you a little wrap up, I'm sorry, I'll have a final slide here, and just to tell you again, oh, there seems to be some issue with the slides, sorry. To tell you again, here we are, the next steps in MSCA for Ukraine. Already 2 days ago, you probably have seen that the call for applications has been issued. All the call documents, including terms of reference and forms, are available on our website. And you see the link here. I would like to reiterate that we will share those slides and the recording with you very soon, within the next 24 hours for sure. Your questions are arriving here, and we will actually use them to update the FAQ should these questions not already be addressed in the FAQ of the MSCA for Ukraine website. But you can also ask us further questions. On 20th of June and 24th of June, we have another round of really practical Q&A webinars. For those, it's not necessary to register in advance. You can just have a look at the MSCA for Ukraine website and then click the link at the time that is indicated here and then also on the website to join us and ask us questions directly that you may have after having read all the documents on the website. The portal will open for submissions on 5th of August. Now, I've seen several people commenting about vacation times in European higher education. We are, of course, very much aware of those, but this date was just chosen in order to also enable to process applications and enable fellowships to start as soon as we can. And therefore, we hope that you will still find a way to submit your application through a host institution. Last but not least, if you have not yet done so, and I suspect most of you will already be subscribed, we have an MSCA for Ukraine mailing list. There is a web link here, join our mailing list. You can click on it and put in your email and receive all our updates for the MSCA for Ukraine program. And so this is my final words. I would like to very much thank you for your participation, for your very active participation in today's webinar. It has been an absolute pleasure. We are looking forward to reading your applications, and we are wishing you all the best possible in those difficult times. Thank you so much. Goodbye.